how jacked can you really get? When do you reach your genetic ceiling as a natural? And when does a massing bulking phase become an ineffective waste of time where you're gaining mostly fat mass from that point? We're going to answer those questions today. And we're going to do it so by using something called the fat-free mass index. This is a measurement tool that's been used for a long time to distinguish and help distinguish whether someone is on anabolic steroids or not. Because we notice that people who are on anabolic steroids typically on average have a much significantly higher fat-free mass index, which is simply a relative measurement of your lean body mass relative to your height and weight. It's kind of like BMI, but better and more specific based on body fat percentages. So let's begin immediately getting practical and helping to answer this question. So I have the fat-free mass index here that you can just type in Google. And what you're going to want to do is put your numbers in. And we're going to use me to start with. And this is what I've looked like about a month ago. So could you guesstimate what my body fat percentage could be? I'm going to give you another video from my Instagram here at Strength of Saad, and you could try and guesstimate my body fat percentage, because you can see that I don't really have visible abs anymore, but I definitely have a lot more muscularity than I did previously 2.5 years ago when I looked something like this on the left to the right. So try and guess my body fat percentage there. This is the much of the transformation that I have been on along my journey as a holistic functional medicine strength and conditioning coach. I was about 83 kilos on the left here, and I got to about 69, 68 kilos on the right. I lost a significant amount of body fat, and I got my skin folds all the way down to about 35 mil. And for those who aren't familiar with what that actually means, that is about stage lean for most competitive bodybuilders within that region. Now, obviously, I didn't have a lot of muscularity on me, but I definitely lost a lot of body fat. And it's very revealing is that a lot of people think that they have, when you go through a gaining massing phase, a lot of people think that they have a lot more muscle mass on them than they do underneath their fat. And then they are quickly humbled that perhaps they do not. Now, looking at the left photo here, it actually makes sense. It is relatively equivalent. It doesn't look like I've lost a whole heap of muscle mass, but definitely to an extent I have. But I'm extremely lean here on the right. And then over 2.5 years, that is when I turned myself more into this and gained about 25 kilos. So asking, when should you stop? When is enough? When is it intelligent to actually stop a bulk? Because you can see now here as I get up, you can see a little bit more accurately, you can see that while I do have a lot more muscle mass on me, I hold significantly more body fat, especially compared to Akshan here, which is one of my Trinity students on the right, who just finished a multi-month aggressive cut. But I also do have more muscle mass on me. So we need to consider, what is my fat-free mass index? When should I stop? What does the science say? Well, the science says, looking at different studies that I will actually pull across here, we notice from the 1996, we notice a study here that showed the fat-free mass index of about 25 in non-steroid users was a previously well-defined limit, or an average. And you can see here based on height, let's say you're about my height, 1.8 meters, and the average is going to be around 24 here. That line is the average there. But there's a whole bunch of outliers here as well. So let's assume now that it's about 25, because it may not actually be. I'll share with you later in the video how actually that number may not be entirely accurate. Let's say it is 25. All right, on the bottom here, you're going to see the fat-free mass index. Let's pull back from, can you guess my body fat percentage? If you guess my body fat percentage when I was really super lean, here, not here, that's my website. Oh, well, you saw it before. I was 69 kilos. Watch what happens to the bar below. Well, about 68. I was that height. My body fat percentage was not 15. It was not 10. it was somewhere, and you can see it go up as the body fat goes down. It was somewhere around 5. But my fat-free mass index was only 20. So I was very far away, or meaningfully far away from my genetic potential at around, if we assume the fat-free mass index is accurate, at around 25. But we believe there's some leeway around this. So you can see, wow, 20 is not a lot. Makes sense. I wasn't very jacked. I was just super lean, very athletic, with a bit of muscle. So let's now go to today. Today, or at least a month ago, I went to 95 kilos. But I was not 5% body fat. Because a fat-free mass index of 28, I would very likely be on some type of anabolic steroid at that. Instead, let's look at what approximately is a body fat percentage. This is about 30. This is about 25 to 29. And this is about 21 to 24. So I was approximately hovering somewhere between 22 to 25% body fat. Just estimating based off this, because I didn't have skin folds. And then you can see progressively what 18 to 20 looks like, 15 to 17 looks like, and etc. I'll show you more later. So I'm approximating, I'm about 25%. I'm going to be a little bit conservative here because typically people really underestimate how fat they are. So I'm going to overestimate, or at least do my best to not be generous to myself and think I'm fatter than I am. Because if I think I'm leaner than I am, then it's going to think my fat-free mass index is higher. So I want to get somewhat of an accurate indication of how far away I am from my genetic potential without performance-enhancing drugs. So now I push that to 25%. Let's say if I'm around 25%. Okay, so I've pushed my fat-free mass index from 20 to about 22, maybe somewhere between 23, in 2.5 years. Now, my genetics aren't particularly anything spectacular from a ability to put on muscle mass. I grew up very skinny and scrawny, and my propensity to gaining muscle mass, maybe not the best as your typical or as your higher responder. In any case, I've got it from 20 to about 22. So I still have ways to go. But I began to look like this. And so what do I do? Do you keep pushing into these territories? Like, where do you go from here? You only go from here. You go to here, or even here. And that, at that point, is, to me, unless you're being a strongman competitor, it is relatively ineffective, and it becomes orders of magnitude more detrimental to your health metabolically, for example. So at that point, a cut might be warranted for a longer period of time to get you down. Now, let's look at some examples of some of my athletes. Actually, before I do that, let me tell you that the fat-free mass index of 25 is the defined limit, and those who had not used steroids was higher. But there was a newer study, and this newer study demonstrated in 10 different sports it crossed of collegiate athletes. So these guys were not, in this study, it was just people who had trained for a couple of years, weight trained, not people who were like serious bodybuilders or anything. So in this study of male collegiate athletes, we discovered something a little bit more interesting, and that the overall fat-free mass index of these collegiate athletes, which the average age was 20, their fat-free mass index was a little bit higher than mine at 22.8, or around mine, plus minus 2.8. The average fat-free mass index in football athletes, not AFL for my Australians, American football, was about 24. In rugby, oh, actually, no, not go to rugby here. Let's go to water polo, was the lowest, about 20. And the upper limit was observed all the way to be 28 or even 29 in all athletes on average, and rugby athletes. Baseball was about 25. Lane Norton, a very well-known PhD, expert in nutrition and fitness in this industry, he's said to get around 27 in the off-season. But the reality is, anabolic steroids was not screened in this study. It was just drugs. So I'm not sure what type of drugs and the extent, but we have to consider that as a confounding variable. Nevertheless, given that they used things like DEXA scans in this study and they measured to accuracy, we can observe that the fat-free mass index, particularly in athletes, may be higher in naturals than 25. We may be able to attain 26, 27, 28. But it's very unlikely that you're going to exceed higher than this. Very unlikely, unless you're using some type of steroids, because we can see here in this dashed line that represents the 97.5th percentile, which means to have a fat-free mass index above 28.5 here, above 28, 29, you would need to have the muscularity and lean body mass of better than 97.5% of other people in your cohort. So statistically, that's extremely unlikely to be you watching this. So operating off the average and the mean, you're much more likely to be, let's say you're 180 centimeters, you're much more likely to be distributed around the 22 to 23 mark. So should you keep going? Should I keep going? Well, if I look at my fat-free mass index, then it's telling me, well, yeah, sure, I should keep going. But before I keep going, you could say, well, probably best to lean down. Leaning down, dropping that body fat, and then building up more muscularity from that point. So you might drop down to 85 if you're on my shoes, maybe a little bit lower. Getting to a place where you have visible abs, getting to a place where you have 10 to 12% body fat, where you are more like, even that's 15 to 17, you get some visible abs, but it's pretty hard to see. 12 to 14, now we're starting to see more of it come through. 10 to 11, now we're really talking on some visibility through those abs. This to a point you would be recommended to come to, and this is something I recommend to my athletes and clients to come to after a long bulk before doing it again. Because if you don't, and if you start back up at a higher base like this, then you have a much less runway to work from to look good while gaining mass. Speaking of, let's look at one of my clients. So, and have a look at how much he's gained. So the client here is about 22, 23 years old, is about 6'3", and currently this is his weight. The average is about 88 kilos. He's really been growing aggressively over the last month. This is not something I recommended. This is something that he did off his own. And fortunately, he's still able to have some visibility through his abs here, which is great. Now, he would be hovering probably still somewhere between the 10 to 13, 14% body fat range, which is good. So let's go to his and calculate. So let's say he is 6'3". Swap that over. So that's about 190 centimeters. And then he's 88 kilos. But obviously he's not 25% body fat. He's likely, and I know this is the most accurate way to do it, we're not doing skin folds with him, he's likely somewhere around here or here. Maybe here. So his fat-free mass index is around 20 to 21, somewhere in between there. So he has a much longer runway to work with. And he'll likely, as he gains body weight, as he gets up into the 95 kilo range, because he's quite taller and gains more body fat, we will see what happens, but he should proportionally increase his fat-free mass index, but also body fat will come with it. Now, the other client, this client, a strongman competitor, he is on, and I'm helping manage his PEDs, and he's on a variety of different PEDs, and he's the same weight. He's the same weight as the client you saw before, but look how much more muscularity that he has compared to the client before. Now, he's also shorter. He's about 170 centimeters instead of 190. So therefore, it makes sense on his frame why he's up, but he still has some visible abs. So let's go in this case. I'm giving you guys different looks, different case studies here. Let's say he's about 172. He's about 87 kilos, and his body fat percentage is likely somewhere around 14 to 15. But look at that. Look at this significant difference here. Is now, okay, the fat-free mass index at his height, at his weight, at his body fat percentage is superior to suspicious, which makes complete sense. Why does it say suspicious? Because it's suspicious that it's possible and suspicious that it could be on some type of performance-enhancing drug, which is accurate. So now we can see the natty versus the non-natty response and how a fat-free mass index above 25 is absolutely attainable. I think it's, who is it? I made some notes here that I think Ronnie Coleman? Dorian Yates. Wasn't even 30 when he won the Night of the Champions. I was reading some content from Paul Carter, and there were some conversations they were having, so some important caveats here. So that is an example of what's attainable with structured, intelligent PED use and very intense hard training. So it's unlikely. The takeaways here, it's giving you guys something to work with. Plug in your fat-free mass index to see where you're at. Ideally, skin folds, DEXA scan are going to be the most accurate within their own testing parameters for body fat percentage. Plug that in if you can't use the photos, and then see how far away you are. Typically wouldn't recommend exceeding 20-25% body fat, but guys like Paul Carter, they say don't even exceed 15% body fat. It's a waste. I would like to explore their reasoning behind that, but people like him are very intelligent and I'm sure have logical reasoning behind it. So some people don't even go beyond 15%. I chose to go above it for a number of different reasons. It was more than the logic of it. It was the pursuit of it. So if you are at a higher body fat percentage between 20 to 25, get to sub 10%, get to around 10%, and then see how much you have left on you, and then build up from there. And then by the time you gain, maybe a few kilos, 5, if you're lucky, 10 kilos of lean body mass, you will go from that 10% and you'll end up at around 20, maybe 22% body fat, high teens, instead of starting at 15, 16, 17% and ending up much fatter proportionally at 25%. So I'll finish off on what Paul Carter said. If you're pushed up against of this scale of around nearly 25, and also pushed up against the scale of body fat percentage, that's high, doing stuff like massing phases or bulking cycles is pretty dumb. You're going to be growing at a rate so slow that even if all your sleep, training, and diet is dialed in, that no one will visibly be able to see your gains. So there's no reason to pile on a bunch of slop on top of yourself when that absolutely is not speeding up or moving the ceiling for mass. And now you have an indication of at what point should you slow down to stop, get into a cutting phase, where is your genetic potential as a natural, and if you're on PEDs. And now you have a accurate indication of how fast and how far you can and should go to getting jacked and knowing your ceiling. If you want to know more, Strength of Saad on Instagram and YouTube here. Questions, comments, put them below.